My name is Beth Fisher, and I am the adult programming librarian from the Iowa City Public Library. And this is the first time I've ever done genealogy on the internet like this. Normally I do it in person. So we'll see how it goes. I use the same PowerPoint, but I also talk a lot when I do it in person. So I will try to keep the rambling to a minimum. And you are here tonight for the introduction to genealogy. And there we go. Genealogy is the study of a family history. It's building your family history, documenting the members of your family and their relationships to one another, but you're documenting the relationships with proof. Vital records, family documents, family records, historical events. There's all sorts of ways to document your relationship or the relationship between two people. Now, doing genealogy research, one of the big things you need to realize, and you probably already know it, but it's researching in reverse order. You're going backwards in time. And the reason that is it's much easier to go backwards than it is to go forwards. And I'll explain that more a little later. Your family tree begins or ends, depending on how you look at it, with you. You are the person that you know most about. And it's always easier to start anything with what you already know. And you probably know a lot about yourself. Well, I'm sure you know a lot about yourself that falls into genealogical facts. What is your name? What is your current name? Where were you born? What were your parents' names? If you are adopted, this might be a little harder, but you can always build a family tree just based off your adopted family. What were your grandparents' names? What records were created when you were born? And by that, I don't necessarily mean a birth certificate. There might be family records in a family Bible. There might be church records. There will most likely be a birth certificate. And do you have access to all of these? In most every family, there's usually one or two people who get the ancestry bug, the genealogy bug, and who know all the family stories and have probably tried to do a family tree before, and they may or may not have succeeded. Do you know who that is in your family? And do you know, would they share what they have learned with you? And I'm sure they would, because that's the whole point of genealogy, is passing on information. Now, this is an introduction to genealogy class, so we're going to start with all of the tips and tricks. And in the beginning, the first thing you want to know is that you should always, always cite your sources. When you find a fact, write down, if it's in a book, you write down the title, the author, and the page number, and where you found the book. Did you find it at a library? Did you find it in a church? Do you own it, like a family Bible? If it's a website, what is the URL of the website? And what date did you find that fact? And where did you find that fact? If you're copying from a real book, do yourself a favor and copy the title page of the book as well. That'll give you the name, the copyright date, the author. And if it's in a library, it might even have the library stamp right on it. If it doesn't, write that on there. Write where you found the book. And then keep all that information together with that one fact for your files, so that you know where you found that fact and can find it again if you actually need to. If you're searching on the internet only, remember that everything on the internet can disappear without notice. Sites go up, sites go down, sites get bought out. If you find a fact that you need or want to keep, consider either printing it and having a hard copy or making a digital copy of it somehow to save for your records. Even if it's something simple that you're sure you can find later, you may or may not. Now, it says on here, keep track of where you've been. And that sounds like sort of a dumb thing, but let me explain. When you're searching for a hard to find fact, it can get very frustrating. And you can just get so fed up, you're going to quit for today. If you haven't written down the 6 places you've already looked, and a month from now you decide to try and find that fact again, if you don't have it written down, you're going to go to the most likely sites, and they're probably places you've already been. So keep a list of where you've been, especially if you didn't find anything. Write where you looked and where you thought you should look, but didn't find it. And that way you just won't reinvent the wheel every time you do it. Now, there are some, I don't know the right word for it, conventions in genealogy. You want to spell out dates. And by that, I mean abbreviate the month with words, use 2 digits for the day and 4 for a year. In America, we list it as January 9th, 1976. But in Europe, they would say the 1st of September, 1976, because they put the day first, then the month, then the year. If you haven't written it out, you might be interpreting it wrong. When you write down the location of something, again, the convention is to write the city name, the county name, and the state name. And if it's a foreign country, the name of the country, just so you remember. There is a case in the digital realm of Ancestry where somebody put a fact out on the internet that a town in Iowa was in Johnson County, when in fact it was not in Johnson County. It's clear across the state. And every so often we get questions at the library, people wanting to know information from that town's newspaper. And I wish I could tell you the name of the town, but I'm blanking. And then we'll ask them, what exactly are you looking for? And they'll say, name of town, Johnson County, Iowa. And everybody at the reference desk says, no, sorry, that town is actually in this county. So write it all out. When you are writing a person's name, especially a woman, all genealogists will only list a woman's maiden name. If they are going to put the married name, they put the maiden name in parentheses. So in this case, my example here, Mary Ann Johnson Fisher is the wife of James Fisher and the daughter of George Johnson and my mom. So that's why she's our example. If you are going to interview people, even family relatives, about stories or about things they remember about your genealogy, when you take notes, at the top of the notes, put the name of the person and the date that you are interviewing them, and then a note on how they are related to either you or to the story that you're having them tell you. Because genealogical records, their purpose is to pass on to future generations. If you wrote, Aunt Kate told me this story, well, who's Aunt Kate? And how does she relate to you? Put it in your notes for the future. Now, if you're going to keep records, there are basically 3 ways to do it. Paper-based, which is using a notebook or blank paper or printable forms. There are all sorts of different charts, pedigree charts, family group sheets, biographical outlines. We'll go into all of those. But there's also software that you can buy for your own computer, which makes all of your information in your computer and organizes it that way. Family Tree Maker is a software that you can buy from Ancestry.com. There's something called Legacy, Root Magic, Reunion. All of these are software packages. But today, the most common way that people do it is on the web. And they do it through Ancestry.com, Family Search, which is the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, Genie.com, or MyHeritage.com, and there are others. Most often, if it is a free site you are accessing, they won't let you save your information. If you have a paid subscription or do it through a library where you've made an account, you may or may not be able to. It sort of depends on the website. Now, I'm going to teach you about this horrible word, and then you never have to learn about it again. It's something called GEDCOM, and it used to be a much bigger deal than it is today, but you need to know what it is. It is the computer standard by which one website or software saves material so that it can be opened by a different website or software. All genealogy software saves files in GEDCOM, in the GEDCOM method. Now, the only time this is going to be important to you is if you're buying a software package. Somewhere on it, look for the word GEDCOM. You don't have to remember what it stands for. You just have to look for it and see it. If it says it, you're fine. And we'll never talk about it again. All right, printable genealogy forms. These are the fun ones to fill out, and you'll end up with binders and binders or desk drawers full of forms. On the right, you have something called a pedigree chart, which lists parent to child, well, child to their parents and further and further and further. And then on the left is a family group sheet, which is all the information about one family, 2 parents and kids. We're going to talk about each of them. Now, this is where I wish we were in the same room because I like to point. So I'm going to have to verbally point. This is a 6 generation pedigree chart that connects a child to his or her parents. There's no space on this chart for siblings, which is explainable if you have a lot of siblings. Now, on the far, it's shaped like an arrow. On the left, I'm getting out of link here. By filling out this chart by convention, fathers are always the top line, mothers are the lower line. And again, only the maiden name is kept for the wife. Up in the left corner, there's a box that says chart number. And then beneath that, it says number 1 on this chart is the same as number blank on chart blank. So if you're starting with yourself, you're going to go to the far left side to the point of the arrow and put yourself. And then beneath it, it says birth, place, married, place, death, place, and then a little lower, 1 line for your spouse. Now, jump back a step. If you go up, person 2 is your father with all of those same birth, marriage, and death. Person 3 below you is your mom. Now go back up. Person 4 is the father of person 2. Person 5 is the mother. Then you jump down to your mother's parents, and so on backwards. Now, if you get to, say, person 10, who would be your father's grandfather, and if you know a whole lot more about him, there aren't any more lines to fill in. So you would take person 10 and start a whole new sheet where person 10 becomes person 1. That's why up at the very left corner, it says person 1 on this chart is the same as person number whatever on chart whatever. So as you're working, the first thing you do is number your chart. and you just make them consecutive. So we would take person 10, fill him in as person 1, and then keep going. And you're going to see you're never going to be able to fill in all the blanks. There's always going to be paths that you take that sort of weave on. You know, I know a lot about my great grandmother's mother's family. But from that point, I know about the men in the family. And then we jump to tracing male grandfathers and great grandfathers and 4 times great grandfathers, etc. All right, the next chart is a family group sheet. This is a family group sheet of the big blank family. You put the name right there. Then you put the full name of the husband, his father, and his mother. Then the full name of the wife, her father and mother. Then over on the right, you have places to put the birth date and place of the father in the family, the marriage date and place where they got married, the death date and place and where they're buried, if you know any of this. Same thing for the mother. And then beneath that, it says other spouses. In the past, there were records just like there are today of divorces and remarriages and deaths and things like that. You just want to make a note of how many other spouses this person had. And then you have, I don't know, I think it's 12 lines for all of the children. And you just put the full name of the child, well, the full name of the children of this marriage, then birth date and place, and it's a little blank for that, so you got to squeeze sometimes. Death date and place, where they're buried, were they married, when did they marry, and who was their spouse. You squash all that in there. Now, there are other versions of this form. If you come from a family with a whole lot of children, and basically it just keeps going on the next page with more blanks for children. But there are all of these forms. There are all sorts of versions of these forms. Now, this one, when I first started, I didn't use it. And now I wish I had, because this is a biographical outline of the life of blank. It's one person. And all it is sort of like a table of contents of what you found in the order you found it. You put the date of whatever you found, like the date actually on the newspaper article announcing their birth. How old were they? Well, they were 0 because they were born. What was it? It says event and place. So you would put, my dad was born in Washington, D.C. on February 21st, 1943. The source, where did I find that? I actually found his birth certificate. So I would write in there, birth certificate, found at, and where I put it. And then that's just thing 1 on his table of contents of his life. And that way, as you're doing other things, you'll have a record of the facts you've already found. And you'll end up with a piece of paper for everybody on your family tree, which is kind of cool. But also, some of them will only have a few pieces of information. You won't find a lot for some people on your tree. And other people, you'll find all sorts of stuff. Okay, in the past, doing genealogical research meant that you physically had to go through mountains of primary source material, books, records, you name it. It required lots of time and lots of travel. You had to go where those documents were. And to a large extent, you still do. And I'll explain why in a bit. Thanks to the digital revolution, today we can search online through huge amounts of information in seconds. Websites, both free and subscription, provide access to a wealth of information. However, only a very small fraction of all the information in the world has been digitized. Iowa City Public Library we have made a local news index to all the stories in the Press Citizen. We're only back to 1961, and we've been working on it for years. So the further back you go, the more likely you're going to have to go to where that information is. Now, the Iowa City Public Library offers access to a number of subscription databases that are of interest and use to people who are doing history research. Ancestry.com, Family Search, Heritage Quest, Newspaper Archives, Americans' Obituaries and Death Notices, and on and on. Now, I need to explain what I mean by a subscription database. Nothing in the world is free. A subscription database is something the library pays for, so you don't have to. That's all it means. We pay for it and make it available to you. Now, at ICPL, this is a shot of our website from a while back, so excuse me if the colors don't match. But right in the center near the top, it says Books and More. When you click on that little arrow next to the word More, a drop-down menu will appear, and it has 3 columns. In one of those columns, you'll see the phrase Online Resources. When you click on it, you will get to this page. Online resources are listed alphabetically by the name of the resource. So you could just scroll down to see what's there, or on the far right-hand side are a list of categories, that other big arrow. If you click Genealogy and Local History, you're going to get to this page, which lists only the things that we think would be useful for genealogy or local history. And again, they're still in alphabetical order, so you might have to scroll to find things, but they're here. Now, you'll also notice the bright yellow library cards next to each of these. That means in order to access it through our library, you have to have a library card and live in Iowa City, Hills, University Heights, Lone Tree, or rural Johnson County. Those are considered our primary patrons. Your tax money pays for us to do this. People in Coralville can come in and access all of these things in the library. But if they want to do it from home, they got to do it through the Coralville Public Library. Now, if you look down to the 4th one on this list, Family Search, and it says in library use only. Our contract with Family Search lets us provide it to you only in our building. However, Family Search is free for everyone. Once you have a free account, which we'll show you how to do, it's very simple, you can get into it from anywhere at any time. The difference is Iowa City Public Library has become what's called an affiliate library for Family Search. And that the perks of being an affiliate library are when you're in Family Search and you're looking at an old document, sometimes they make a photograph available. An affiliate library, you'll always be able to see the photograph. You might not going through just your free account. And it has to do with the contracts that they pay to get access to the information. Now, we're going to start with Ancestry.com and explain a little bit about it. We offer what's called the library version of Ancestry.com. It's only, there's a caveat to what I said on the screen here. It's only available on computers in the library. It's more limited than the full version that you pay for to use at home. But during the COVID pandemic, Ancestry figured everybody was home and trying to entertain themselves. So they made Ancestry free to search. And they never gave us an end date on when they were going to stop that free availability until last week. Beginning October 1st, it will go back to being where you have to use it through the library and you have to have a card, and we have to pay for it. But right now, it's available to anybody to use. The easiest way to use it is come through our library and do it that way. And I told you we'd also recently become a Family Search affiliate library. By logging in through our website, you have access to a lot more original documents, which is what they call their photographs and things. Now, Family Search is always free to anyone because it is a product of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, the Mormon Church, because in the Mormon faith, family history and genealogy is very, very important. The way you get a free account on Family Search is you click one of the buttons that says make a free account. And what they ask of you is 3 things: your name, your father's name, and your mother's name. That's it. By doing that, you have given them 3 more data points to add to their database. But that's all. All you gave them was names. And from that point on, you have free access to their website. Now, Family Search is very, very similar to Ancestry.com, but it also contains a lot of information that you won't need if you are not Mormon. In the Mormon faith, there are different types of marriages. If you are married in a Mormon temple, you are considered sealed and married for all eternity. Even after your spouse dies and you marry someone else, you're still married to that first spouse. That sort of information you may find in FamilySearch.com. If someone in your family was Mormon, if nobody's Mormon, the blanks will be empty. It's not a big deal. But often, if you're looking for something in Ancestry and you hit a roadblock, log in to Family Search and do the same search again and see if they have it. Because the Mormon Church pours a huge amount of money into Family Search and its sister websites around the world. And they do it by contract with city governments, state governments, county governments. And so they may actually have access to things Ancestry doesn't yet. Okay. Heritage Quest, we're not even going to talk about anymore. It is a website that the library has, but it's going away. It's just not as good as either of the other 2 are. Now, there are lots of other websites online. Some are free, some require registration, like Family Search, and others require you to subscribe. And not all of them are great big websites like Ancestry.com. Some have a distinct purpose. MyHeritage.com and Genie.com are big websites. Find a Grave is exactly what it says. It's people who have gone out and taken pictures and written indexes to cemeteries. And they photograph each and every stone in a cemetery. And they put the information up online. And then if someone in your family is there, or you know more information about that grave or that person, you can submit it and add to the information that they have. But it'll tell you where the cemetery is, where the records are kept for the cemetery, if there's a church involved, et cetera, et cetera. Now, findmypast.com is for British and Irish family history. And a whole bunch of Americans have British and Irish family history. PalestineFamily.net, FamilyTreeOz.com, and there are many, many more. Now, Cindy's List isn't a genealogy website. It is a website that tells you about other websites. It's literally a giant list. So if you're having trouble finding, I don't know, I won't say a birth certificate, like if you want the marriage license for your great great grandparents, who were married in the little bitty town in North Dakota that's actually, they probably got married in Canada, but you don't know for sure, but you don't know where to look. Go to Cindy's list and find the blank that says, what are you looking for? You type it in, bing, it'll come back with some places to look. Cindy's list is a good place to get lost, and it will give you ideas that you have never thought of. It's just an amazing resource. And make sure you note that it's Cindy, Cyndis list. And its true name is Cindy's List of the Genealogy Sites on the Internet. But if you just type in the word Cindy's List, it'll come up. Now, FamilyTreeMagazine.com is an online magazine that publishes a list of the top genealogy websites every year. And I used to have a link down there to it, but I took it away because for the last couple of years, they haven't changed the list. So I don't know if they've stopped doing it, but Family Tree Magazine, it's interesting. I canceled my subscription to it because I got more mail and junk mail, and I mean email. I don't get much paper mail. More emails from them. I mean, they were filling my mailbox, and after a while, I just got to the point it was too much. Now, all right. So that's all background, how you do what you do. Now we're going to look at some of the most commonly used sources for genealogy research. And we're going to talk about the census, vital records, and by vital we mean birth, marriage, and death, and then a few smaller places that are very helpful. All right, for American genealogy, the US Census is sort of the bedrock of genealogy resources. It should, in many cases, be the first source that you try. Oh, Siamese kitties. That's okay. My two are sitting on each side of me and I keep pushing them away. Now, the reason the census is so important, it is inclusive. The government of the United States attempts to gather the same information about everybody in the US at the same point in time. It shows families living together. It connects generations. The census is available partially or fully in a lot of different places. Ancestry, Heritage Quest, Family Search. We even have some census material on microfilm at the university or at the Iowa City Public Library. Now, the United States Constitution requires the government to count the population every 10 years. That's what a census is. It's counting everybody. And every 10 years, the questions change. It's what's important at this time in the world. Now, the census is designed to be a snapshot. Censuses happen all over the United States the same week or the same 3 weeks of time. Everybody fills out the census. It doesn't have complete information. There are no maiden names for people. And unfortunately, errors happen a lot, especially back in the day when they were writing it in ink on big sheets of paper in a book. Now, okay, the federal census has been taken every 10 years since 1790. And it says every 10 years from 1790 to 1950 with a little asterisk, because that's when they started mailing out the census. But before that, census takers, you got a job as a census taker and you were given a district. And the district is part of a town or a county. And beginning at a specific date, every census taker went out and they went door to door to door, talking to whoever would talk to them about the residents who lived in that apartment or house or whatever. Every person was asked the same questions all over the United States. This thing that they filled out was called the population schedule. Once that schedule was completed and they were done taking the census for the year, it was mailed to Washington, D.C. And the Census Department uses it to compile statistics, basically, about who lives in the U.S., what they do for a living, how many kids they have, do more of them live in town or on farms, etc. Now, these numbers are used to determine the number of representatives that each state gets to send to Congress, and therefore the congressional districts within each state. The Census Bureau issued something called a statistical report of the population a few years after the census, when they're finally done counting everything. Now, by law, that population schedule, that big document they filled out, those are completely private for 72 years from the date of the census. The 1940 census was released to the public on April 2nd, 2012. And librarians around the world lost their minds because all of a sudden we had another 10 years of information on people. Now, census records from 1790 to 1940 are maintained by the National Archives, well, the National Archives and Records Administration. Records from 1950 to 1910 can only be obtained by the person named in the census or their legal heir. And the only reason you would need to do that is if you were trying to prove something legally about your family. That's why they're only open to the person or their heir. Now, the information collected in each census has changed over time. And the questions are listed in little bitty print at the top of every one of those columns. And from 1790 to 1840, the census only recorded the name of the head of the household. Then there was wife and kids. 1850, the first time the people in the household were given a name. So the mother's name or the father was always there. The mother or the wife got a name, as did all the kids. From 1850, well, in 1850 and in 1860, there was a separate schedule that counted the number of slaves. All it did was count. It gave the owner's name, but there was no place for the name of the slaves. 1870 was the first census where there was actual information gathered about the Black population. There was a blank for color. W was white, B for Black, M for mulatto, C for Chinese, and I for American Indian. Those were your choices. 1880, the first census that actually put your address. What did they use before that? They used a number. 1, this is the first house I visited. 2, this is the second house I visited. Didn't give an address, no street, no nothing. You knew what district they worked in because it says at the top of the census page that he's filling out, he or she, it was almost always a he, the name of the town or the township and which of the districts that person was interviewing people in. But on 1880 census, it's the first time your actual physical address was listed. 1900, the first census that asked people who had immigrated, were you an immigrant? What year did you immigrate? And have you already been naturalized? Yes or no? That's all. 1940, the most recent census, the reason everybody lost their minds when this became available is because it was a data dump. There was no indexing. Volunteers from around the US and probably around the world took part in the indexing. They looked at the pictures of the census and typed out everything they read. Errors were made. Handwriting was awful. We're human. But we indexed the census. Now, the Census Bureau website of the census.gov has a list and a website that will show you all of the questions on each of the 23 federal censuses. And there's a big, long URL listed on this page. Don't worry about writing it down. Right? You can Google the phrase, list of the questions in the census, and it'll get you there. And they're fascinating. There are, I wish I could remember what year of the census it asked for the wife, how many children were born to this marriage? How many children are still living? Is this your first, or I don't remember how they phrased it, but basically, is this your first marriage, second marriage, third marriage, go on from there. Some of the questions are just entertaining as all get out. So it's fun to read. Now, the census at some time or some years of the census, there were so many questions that the paper was double-sized. It was in a book that opened and it was 2 long pages. When you are looking at the census for information, just make sure you're not looking at one that has 2 pages. See if there's an adjacent page with more information. And sometimes you may have to be very creative. If the person you're looking for has a very common or very commonly misspelled name or abbreviated name, George was often just G or Geo, or who may have been referred to as a nickname, Junior, Squirt, whatever, that may be listed in there. It depends on who was answering the questions. And sometimes, often, people moved between sentences. If you're not finding them in the city where you expect to, search within the county or within the state, or look in other family records to see, did they move to somewhere? Now, when you find somebody in whatever your census, stop for a second and go up and read the questions they were asked, because you might find information you didn't know or you weren't expecting. The 1890 census contains the question, how many children was this person the mother of? And how many of those children are living? I found an entire branch of one of my ancestors' family trees we didn't know existed, because she had 3 older children, very young. Then they moved off, had families of their own. Her husband died, and later she remarried my relative and had 3 more children. We didn't know about the other 3 because they weren't part of the new kids' lives. Now, vital records. What is a vital record? Vital records are the records of a life event that are created and maintained by a governmental authority. Birth certificates, marriage license, death certificates. Excuse me. Until the early 20th century, vital records were created and kept at county level. After the 20th century began, most of the record keeping moved to the states. Vital records, as populations grew, it was just too much for county governments to deal with. Access to vital records is not consistent and will vary by state or even by county within a state. Some states have digitized their holdings, some states haven't. The Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, the CDC, National Center for Health Statistics, has a website, Where to Write for Vital Records page, that details state by state where to write for birth records, death records, marriage records, divorce records. You can just do a Google search for the CDC. Actually, you could do a Google search, where to write for vital records, and it would get you there. Now, of those three kinds of vital records, birth records are the least accessible to the general public. Most often, birth certificates are closed to researchers. Birth registration is a fairly recent phenomenon. Before the 1920s, governments didn't require you to register the birth at all. Now, the reason they are closed to the public, they record the name of the infant, the date and location of the birth, the name of the parents, often the names of grandparents, the father's occupation, and the parents' ages. And the person on the birth certificate could still be alive. That's the prime reason not all birth certificates are open. There is some very private information, and if any of the people contained in it are still alive, it would be a breach of privacy. Now, marriage records may contain information on people still living, and thus may be harder to access. You may have to prove your relationship to the people being married to get access to the records. And if you can, most places are fine with it, as long as you prove you're doing genealogy and this is how you're related to this person. They may or may not contain, they almost always have the bride, the groom, and the date of the wedding. Often they will have the name of the person, the officiant who performed the ceremony, and their authority to perform a ceremony. How did they get the right to marry you? Sometimes they will have the age of the bride and groom, and sometimes they will have the parents of the bride and groom listed, which is great because it gives you access to a whole bunch more people that way. All right, the last one is death records. And death records are the easiest of all vital records to access because there are fewer privacy concerns. The person is dead. The amount of information on a death record will completely depend on who filled out the form. It may or may not contain the date of death, the cause of death, the place the person was buried, the name of a spouse or next of kin, individual's most recent address, the individual's occupation. Now, death records often contain information that you don't find in the census. They may include the town of birth, the name of parents of a deceased person. That would give you the woman's maiden name, and possibly the deceased's mother's maiden name as well. It literally depends on who's filling out the information. If a family member is helping fill out a death certificate, there'll be a lot more information than if a mortician is filling out a death, or a policeman. Okay, now there are other ways you can get the same information that is contained in a vital record, because information is very, very rarely contained in just one place. Family Bibles. Some families wrote all sorts of everything down in a Bible or other religious text. And I was not aware of this, but apparently there's something called prayer cards, and they are very collectible. They are the little cards that are given out at a funeral that has information about the person who died and the words to the prayer they're going to say during the service. A lot of people keep these things. I did not know that. There are books written by families, family histories. There are community histories written about a certain community at a certain time and the people who founded the community. There are church records, depending on the church and where the church is. There may be more or less. There are social and religious clubs, things like the Masons or the Daughters of the American Revolution, or name a club here. There are bank records if someone in your family was a pack rat and kept everything, like my parents. There are insurance records. There are newspapers. A lot of time, vital information was announced or recorded in the paper. Somebody was born, not so often. Somebody dies, that's usually in the paper. Somebody gets married, may or may not be in the paper, depends on the paper and depends on which decade they got married. But newspapers are a really good source of information. Whoop. Now, other resources at ICPL. We have these things called city directories, and they were the predecessor of the phone book, mainly from 1860 to 1930, but they still happen today. We get one every year. They list the residents and the businesses in a town. They can be used to track individuals between census years. They show they current ones list both people by name, and then they list every residence in the city by address. So you go to your street and you look down the record for your street, and pretty soon you're going to hit your house number and there's your name. Same thing for back in history. But it's also really, really full of local ads. Like there's always a page about all the local churches and when their services are and things. All the schools are listed, lots and lots of clubs and organizations. Now, if you're lucky, like Iowa City is, your library will have cemetery records. In Iowa City's case, the Johnson County Genealogical Society took it amongst themselves to index or go to each of the cemeteries, find the records that they could find, and index them all. We have printed copies of each of those indexes at the library. They don't go out of the building, but we have them. We have a few local histories written about Iowa City and early Johnson County. We have lots of school yearbooks from 4 high schools that Iowa City has had over time, plus the University of Iowa, plus 2 junior high / middle schools. Now, the Social Security Death Index is in here as its own thing because although you can access it in places like Ancestry and Family Search, you can also go directly to the Social Security Death Index. The Social Security Death Index, anybody basically who had a Social Security card and who dies, the government is informed, and they keep a record, and on the Social Security Death Index, it'll say the name of the person, their Social Security number, where they lived, how they died, and who is filling out this information. And there's an extra blank for like the spouse and the kids, or spouse and heirs, or something like that. The Social Security Death Index is notoriously slow. If this person died this year, it's not going to be in there yet. But if they died 40 years ago, it'll be in there. It's available through all of those websites. Everybody has a link to it. Now, historical newspapers, the digitization of newspapers is a big sore spot for a lot of people and a lot of libraries, because in order to digitize a newspaper, you have to have the permission of the owner of the company. Iowa City's newspaper is owned by the Gannett Corporation. Iowa City's newspaper has a very sketchy past of digitization. There are little tiny towns in Nebraska where the library was given a grant by someone in the community, and they digitized every single issue of the newspaper from when it started to today. And the reason I know this is it's Wayne, Nebraska, where my grandma lived. But it's awesome to go through the indexes of those old newspapers because you find so much. But newspapers are definitely worth searching. All right. Now, when you are getting ready to start your search, ask yourself what you already know, and either using one of those pre-printed forms or some blank paper, write down the facts that you know and work backwards from either today or the date of your birth. And just write down what you're remembering. Take it easy. Fill it in as you go. Partial information is fine. What you want to do is take your time and give yourself a place to start. One of the easiest ways to start working on your family tree is to talk to your family members. And do yourself a favor. Start with your oldest family members first. Don't wait and say, I will get to them, because what happened in my family, my grandmother got dementia, my grandfather died. They were the two that kept all the information. Their children had some of it, but we ended up digging through boxes and piles. And I mean, we eventually did get most of it, but I'm kicking myself for not having interviewed them or talked to them about it and recorded the conversations. Relatives provide lots of information about names, dates, places, relationships, and give you colorful details and written records, colorful details that written records are unlikely to contain. Thankfully, my grandmother kept every letter ever written to her, so I had a lot of letters to go through. Talk to your oldest relatives while you still can. Ask about records that they might have, or artifacts like scrapbooks, marriage licenses, letters, family Bibles, anything. And if you're going to go talk to a relative, ask them in advance if they will talk to you, and give them some time to think about your questions and gather their mementos, their scrapbooks, their Bibles, whatever. And then sit down and talk with you about them. Take thorough notes or record the conversation and ask to borrow the mementos to have copies made. Do not ask if you may have them. The reason they kept them is because they mean something. And if they think they're going to lose something, they're not going to want to let it out of their hands. But if you make a point of saying, I will make a copy and I'll be very careful and get it back to you just the way it is, you're more likely to get access to things. All right. Start your search. Pick one fact that you know about yourself and go out and try to find proof of that fact. Start small. My fact I started with was, what was my paternal grandfather's full name? I had a last name and I had a nickname. I never knew his full name. Then think to yourself, where might I find this fact? Census should be the first place you think of. Don't try searching one way and then give up if you don't find it. Census records, vital records, military service records. There are all sorts of places you can start looking for one fact.
I'm just going to hop in and remind you that it's 8 o'clock.
Look, last page. that is my assistant Bond, my assistant, nothing. She's our tech goddess at the library, and she's here to keep me on track, and it's
I can be
8
your
o'clock.
assistant for the night. That's fine. I'm here to
Okay.
assist you.
Now, way back here, when we talked about forms, all of these things, I'm going to print out a whole bunch of them and put them in a display holder on or near the information desk on the second floor. You can come by and pick them up, pick up the ones you want, pick up one of each. Actually, you can pick up 2 or 3 of each. I'll make that many copies. But it's always a fun and sort of sanity preserving way is to start with a form where you fill in the blank, because then you're trying to remember, what was I supposed to write down about my grandpa? What was I supposed to write down? Another thing, please use a pencil. It sounds silly, but so many people today write with pens, and then you go scratch it out and you make a mess. Use a pencil. Or use a computer. A lot of these forms are available online where you can fill them in online. Now, hopefully, we will have, as soon as the library opens back up to people and we are allowed to do classes again, one-on-one classes, I'm going to do this one over. You are welcome to take it as many times as you like. There is what used to be a second class. I'm thinking of splitting it into 2. And it's a guide to Ancestry.com and Family Search. And I thought about doing it as 2 separate classes, but they're so similar. I might do a lot of Ancestry and then show you Family Search and how similar they are. Once you learn to use one, you'll know how to use the other. And then we have another class that I don't teach as often because there's not as big a demand for it, called Military Genealogy. Normally, May, this month, is Historic Preservation Month, and it's also Irving Weber Days. This is part of Irving Weber Days. Irving Weber was Iowa City's unofficial historian for many, many, many years. And after he passed away, a bunch of organizations in town decided to celebrate him during History Month because he gave so much to the history of Iowa City. He wrote a weekly newspaper column for decades, and we have them in book form at the library. And he was writing for people's entertainment. So the stories are just amazing. But we've indexed them all. So if you're looking for a certain person, you can go to the index and see if there's a story where they're mentioned. We are also very, very lucky in that the State Historical Society has a research facility here in Iowa City. It's on the corner of Iowa Avenue and Gilbert. It's on the northeast corner. The problem is the state library's budget was cut a few years ago, so their hours have been sort of curtailed, but they have information from all over Iowa. They have copies of family histories and community histories and books all about Iowa. It's amazing. If you have ancestors in Iowa that you are looking for, they are a great place to go. We are a great place to go. It's a lot of fun, but it's a definite time suck. Once you get started, you will get addicted fast. And in one of the things I always say in the ancestry class and in the family search class, don't take someone else's word as the truth until you prove it yourself. If they say that I am related to someone named James Fisher, don't assume they know what they're talking about. Find a record that shows they are related. And technically, you should find 2 separate sources that prove the same fact. then you can trust the fact. But always use somebody else's research with a big grain of salt and use it as a hint on where to look next. Now, I have talked for an hour and 7 minutes. Does anybody have any questions? I sort of feel like all I did was yak. Feel free to unmute yourself. Oh, wait, there's chats. Let's see what's in the chat. Hi, Maggie. Oh, yeah, everybody's saying hi to Maggie. I hope you mean Maggie that was barking outside, because that's my dog, Maggie. Glance at your time, says Bond. Oh, and the Siamese cat, she wrote, the best part of Zoom has been able to see everyone's pets. So I'm just glad Maggie left, because she would try to sit in my lap. I am at the
Carol's
library.
got her hand raised, Beth.
I can't see that. Oh, hi, Carol.
There, I have two questions. The first one is probably very stupid, but I'm going to ask it anyway. So in the pedigree chart, first of all, timelines typically run left to right, oldest first on the left.
Yes.
So it seems counterintuitive to me that for the pedigree chart that it's the other way. So why is it doing that way? Why is it done that way?
Honestly, I don't know why, but I think it's because of the way that we write. Let me see if I can write an example here. So I'm going to have to flip my camera. Hold on. Camera, mirror image. Where is it? Mirror. Okay. So I wrote, let me get out of here. I start with me, and then I wrote my dad,
I don't
my
think
mom.
it went, Beth. We've still got the backwards.
You do?
Yeah.
That's weird. Hold on. Mirror. Is it right now or wrong?
Wrong.
Still wrong?
Yeah.
Well, nuts. It won't let me change it. It changes it for me, but not for you. So when you're filling out the form, on the left-hand side, you write me.
Right.
And then you write dad and mom. And then you write their dad and mom. And so you're going from left to right as the way we write. At least that's my guess.
But when you're thinking about a timeline, it seems like the oldest should be on the left.
Yeah, you're right. Timelines are sort of done oldest to newest.
Right.
I don't know.
I've toyed with the idea of doing mine that way, but then I think that would be very confusing to anybody who is trying to align with the
Well, and you could always just do a timeline of your family and, start wherever you want and go whichever direction and just see how it looks. I do think it might be kind of confusing if everybody else is doing it this way, but okay. What was your second question?
Well, it has to do with the death record. So, if I wanted to find out what, for my grandmother who lived in Des Moines, died in Des Moines, if I wanted to find out what her cause of death was, is that something I can just do online, or do I have to go through one of these other search things?
Go through the Social Security Death Index and see if you can find anything there.
Okay.
Also, I'm trying to think. I guess the only place I would know to try is the Social Security Death Index. Now, if you contact the state of Iowa for a death certificate, it should say it on there, but you might have to pay for that.
Oh, okay. But that should be online.
Yeah. I mean, you could go to the state of Iowa and look up on their website for the state of Iowa death certificates and see if they're going to charge you. and what you would have to do to prove that she was your mother. But for a death record, they probably won't make you prove it. But
Okay. Yeah, I used to live in Des Moines like 100 years ago, and I remember going over to the state. It was the state house, the building that's near the Capitol.
Mhm.
That's like an office building, state office building, and
Mhm.
had to request something like that through one of the offices.
Yeah, you probably have to do it in writing, but you might, depending on the state, you might be able to do it online.
Okay, I'll give that a try.
Okay.
Thank
Can
you.
I add something
Hi,
to
Amy.
that? Hi. You said it was your grandmother, right, Carol?
Yes,
Okay. So what year would that have been, do you think?
she died in 1975.
Oh, 75. Okay. I was thinking it would be older than that. No offense that you're that old or anything, but
I did say it was 100 years ago.
yeah, that's true. Well, I was kind of thinking of either Ancestry or Family Search. They do have quite a few death certificates in their database, but I don't know if they would have anything as recently as 1974.
Yeah.
Or 75. That would be the thing. Yeah, so I'm not sure about that.
I'll try the state of Iowa. Well, the Social Security one first. That sounds like the easiest.
Yeah.
That's
Well,
not going
and-
to have the cause, though. And you're looking for the cause of death, right?
The Social Security one.
Oh, okay.
That won't have the cause of death. No.
Oh, okay.
No. So, I mean, so especially if you don't have an Ancestry subscription, your best bet, or go to the Ancestry through the library,
Okay.
Yeah.
or do Family Search,
Okay.
and you might be able to get it from there. But again, I really don't know if 1970s are in there.
And if you're really stumped, send it or call into the library and give it to us as a reference question, and we'll do the work
Oh,
and maybe find it, or we'll tell you how to find it and that it costs money if
Okay.
we find that out. But we get a lot of obituary questions and things like that. So that's what we're there for.
Okay. That's
And we may tell you to go to the Des Moines Public Library too, but
okay. Well, I'll start with that.
okay.
Thanks.
I have a question,
Anybody
Beth.
else?
So when you first start out filling out those,
You're sitting in the dark.
Well, it's bedtime at my house, so there's
Oh,
a sleeping
sorry.
kid. No, it's fine. So when you're first starting out filling out those sheets, if you haven't done really any research, it can be a little overwhelming of like, which direction do I go in?
Yeah.
Do I keep following a paternal line? Do I try to do everything on one generation? Do you have any recommendations about where to start and what
Well,
direction to start, whether to fill
there
out
are
a whole
two-
generation first or try to go back?
There are two types of people, to lump them all together. There are two types of people who do genealogy. The ones that want to know how far back they can get. Child, parent, child, parent, child, parent, child, parent, as far back as they can go. And they don't care about the siblings. And there are the others who want to know everything they can about every generation, how many children they had, when did all the children get married? Who did they get married? How many kids did they have? And they have this, instead of a line, they have this giant fan of a family tree because they want to know everything. And I started out just wanting the long timeline. And then about 3 generations back, got fascinated with my great grandmother. And all of a sudden, I found myself expanding it. And I'm like, wait a minute. So I went back to the beginning, or the end, which was me. And I went and I listed all my cousins and then all of their kids. And so my family tree kind of jumped. I said it's always going backwards, but mine went forward a little because I listed all my cousins, their spouses, and their kids. And then I went back to me, and then I listed all my aunts and uncles and all their spouses. And then my grandparents.
So basically follow your own arrow. Follow your
own arrow. And, there's no saying you have to do everything about everybody. You could pick one generation that you're interested in and do a lot of research on them. And then if you get bored or burned out, jump to another one. But it's not it's not as easy as it sounds to find all the information about even one person, because there's lots of individual little pieces of information that you're going to have to gather. And you may find yourself finding a piece of information like a military draft record that lists on the insurance form for the military draft all the siblings that this person had. And suddenly you're reading about two people you didn't know existed. So to go back, put them in, find out more information about them, you know, you'll find facts and that will make you jump all over your family tree.
I have another question, Beth.
Yes.
When you find two reliable sources
Mhm.
listing something as factual and they are giving you completely different information, like a birth year or the name or, you know, what have you, and any
All right,
thoughts?
my first instinct is that they are not the same person.
Right.
They are two people with similar names and similar
Yeah.
families. Now, you're going to discover that there were a lot of families that named their sons after books of the Bible,
Right.
or people from the Bible, or presidents. I come from a family of 9 boys, all have first names of presidents. My grandfather, my direct grandfather, is George Washington Johnson.
Yeah.
He has,
in my family, that's not so much the problem. I mean, there's weird names in my family.
oh, you're lucky. Weird is easier to find.
But then what'll happen is it'll say like one person was born, and I think that what you're saying, that they're two different people, you know, I'm guessing maybe a father and a son, because what happens is I'll find the same name with two completely different birth years.
Or
you know,
it could be a father and a
in the
nephew.
same location.
It could be a nephew. If they are both named after an ancestor from previous to that, and the father was named, but he wasn't the oldest brother,
Right.
then the oldest brother, his first son, may share the name.
Right. I mean, like, I have an ancestor, Fordyce DeBolt, in this one county in Pennsylvania, and there's two birth years that are like 40 years apart.
Yeah.
It's got to be two different guys.
Yeah. That's a great name. My weirdest one is Welcome Irving Fisher.
No.
So, Fordyce DeBolt, that's a great name.
Yeah.
I have an ancestor that my last name is Throckmorton, a very old English name. I have an ancestor whose name is Basingbourne.
One word? Basingbourne?
Basingbourne Throckmorton.
Wow. Yeah. That's a great name.
Yeah, I think that's pretty unique. I have never heard that ever before.
Well, I am an Elizabeth Ann, and there's at least one of me in every single generation. So, and my mother was Mary Ann, and there's at least one of her in every generation too. So, but it's ancestry, genealogy can be a lot of fun, but it really is addicting, and you'll sit down and say, I'm going to spend 2 hours, and you've blown 6, you know. What usually happens to me is I'll get hungry, or the dog will get hungry, and then I'll realize I've been doing this for way too long today. So, all right. Anybody else have questions or comments? Like I said, I'll have all of these forms printed tomorrow and put at the information desk. You can come grab some.
Yeah.
Or,
Beth,
yeah.
This has been really helpful. I really enjoyed it. I didn't realize like we could ask your help on things.
Yep, sure. Now, I don't guarantee we'll find the answer, but we'll give it a shot.
Well, I have an ancestor that's buried at Oakland Cemetery, not too far. And they were in the Civil War, and so they're in the Civil War area. But I think that there must have been there was a fire, and so a lot of the records, like I've never found his death record because there was a fire.
Now, do you know that there's more than one Civil War area in Oakland Cemetery?
Well, I have found him.
Oh, you found him. Okay.
Phone, But on his stone, it doesn't have the death year. And so when I've gone to the office and asked, like, could I figure out more of this? They said, oh, there was a fire in the 19 blah blahs and we
Right.
lost all those years. And so,
But you may, depending on a lot of things, you may be able to find military information about his death if somebody applied for a pension or if they applied to have a military headstone. There will be information about
Oh.
him. Maybe not his cause of death, but it will give you his date of death and location of death.
yeah, I just don't even have his date of death yet. So,
Well, and you can always send it to the library as a reference question. It always
so
ends up with, for me,
how do you do that?
go to the website and either in the catalog or on the web page itself, there's a button for chat. If you click that and we're not there, it will say, would you like to send an email?
Hmm.
Just fill it in and hit submit, and it will make its way to me or the
Hmm.
2 other people who like to do genealogy, and we
Mhm.
will give it a shot. And what you may get back is a list of other places to try, or you
Yeah.
may get the information you're looking for if it's easy for us to find. But if it's going to take a lot of research, we don't have the time to spend hours of research on one thing, but we will definitely give you help. Now, Iowa City has a genealogical society. We also have a Mormon church on the east side of town that has a library. They meet there, I want to say the 3rd Saturday of the month, but I could be very wrong. What
Hmm.
you can do is call the Mormon church and ask for the library and ask when the genealogical society meets. It's always open to anybody who wants to come. Amy, do you know?
I do know, and we're not actually meeting in person right now. It's all Zoom.
Yeah.
And our
Okay.
next meeting is next Saturday, a week from, not this coming Saturday, but the following Saturday. I can't remember what the date is, but
Do you make those meetings open to the public?
they are open to the public. If you go to our Facebook page, which is Iowa City Genealogical Society,
Okay.
there is a little blurb about our upcoming program, and there's an email address where you email one of our members and tell him that you'd like to attend the meeting. They're at 9:30 in the morning on Saturday mornings. And then he'll just send you the link when it's available. But yeah, we love to have guests. And here's the other thing. This year, we're not collecting any dues. So if you would like to join our organization, you can join for free. And one of the benefits is that you get a monthly, 10 times a year newsletter. And I'm the editor of that newsletter, FYI.
One of the other best things about the genealogical societies, it's full of people like Amy who love to help other people when they get stuck.
Oh, yeah.
And I have gone to those meetings and just casually mentioned to whoever I was sitting next to what I was stuck on. And at the end of the meeting, she stood up and she said, okay, everybody, the lady from the library has a question. And I repeated myself, and they gave me 7 or 8 things to look at and places to go. And it was awesome. They love to talk genealogy, whether it's theirs or yours.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, so it doesn't even, I mean, all of my family's from Illinois, so it was so fascinating for me to see that I had a person that lived in Iowa City who's my direct ancestors. That was a lot of fun to happen to find, but you don't necessarily need to have Iowa City
No,
ancestors.
not at all. No.
No.
It's a club for people who like genealogy.
Mhm.
Exactly. Yeah. Yeah. In fact, some of the people that I work with in that group, all their relatives are from the East Coast.
Mhm.
So yeah, it can be anything.
Yeah, I have a lot of Pennsylvania and Virginia. Yeah. So.
Very
Yeah, I've got
good.
Pennsylvania too, Butler County.
I have Maine, but I don't know where. I just know Maine. All right, folks. Well, thank you so much for coming to this. I hope I didn't go ad nauseum. It looks like a lot of people stayed till 8 o'clock. So, oh my gosh, it's already 8:27.
Yeah.
Sorry, people. Go have the rest of your night. And thank you so much for being part of this.
Thank you
Thank
for doing
you.
Bye.
Thank you, Beth.
Uh-huh.
Bye, everybody.